Dad, help me! I am in pain!
The plane was a ticking time bomb, 30,000 feet in the air, when a piercing scream shattered the hum of the engines. 17-year-old Marcus Jackson, a black teenager with a bright smile and dreams of becoming a pilot, slumped in his seat, his body convulsing from the taser's electric jolt. The flight attendant, a wiry man with a badge gleaming like a warning, stood over him, shouting, "Stay down!" Passengers gasped, frozen in their seats as the cabin filled with the acrid scent of fear. But in row 12, a man rose, calm, commanding, his eyes blazing with purpose. Marcus's father, David Jackson, a renowned civil rights lawyer, stepped into the aisle, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Marcus had always loved planes. As a kid, he'd press his nose against airport windows, watching jets soar, imagining himself in the cockpit. This flight to Chicago was supposed to be special, a father-son trip to visit colleges, a chance to chase that dream. Seated in economy, Marcus chatted excitedly with his dad about aviation school, his headphones dangling around his neck, blasting Kendrick Lamar. Across the aisle, two white kids, Lila, a 15-year-old girl with braids and a sketchbook, and her 13-year-old brother, Ethan, glued to his Nintendo Switch, watched Marcus with curiosity. Lila noticed his plane-themed t-shirt and smiled softly. "Cool shirt," she said softly. Marcus grinned back. "Thanks, you into planes?" It was a small, warm moment, one that felt like the start of something. But not everyone saw Marcus that way. The flight attendant, Greg, had been eyeing him since boarding. Marcus's hoodie, his animated gestures, the way he laughed a little too loudly. Greg's gaze lingered, his lips tightening. David, ever observant, noticed but said nothing, hoping the trip would stay peaceful. It didn't. Mid-flight, Marcus reached into his backpack for a snack. His hand brushed against a metal water bottle and it clattered to the floor, rolling under the seat. "Sorry," Marcus muttered, leaning down to grab it. Greg, already on edge, stormed over. "What are you doing?" he barked, his voice loud enough to turn heads. Marcus froze, confused. "Just getting my bottle." Greg's hand hovered over his taser. "Hands where I can see them." Passengers shifted uncomfortably. Lila whispered to Ethan, "This isn't right." David leaned forward, his voice steady. "He's just picking up his bottle. Let's all stay calm." But Greg wasn't listening. Maybe it was the stress of a long shift. Maybe it was something darker. But he saw Marcus's hand move and panicked. In a split second, he fired the taser. Marcus cried out, collapsing as the barbs bit into his side. Lila gasped, clutching Ethan's arm. Passengers screamed. Ethan's switch fell to the floor, forgotten. But David was on his feet instantly, his presence filling the cabin like a storm about to break. "Remove that taser from my son now," he said, his voice low but unyielding. Greg fumbled, stepping back, but the damage was done. Marcus, shaking, looked up at his dad, his eyes wet with pain and humiliation. David knelt beside him, checking his pulse, his lawyer's mind already racing. "You're okay, son," he whispered, though his heart pounded with rage. Lila, trembling, pulled out her phone and started recording. "This is wrong," she said, her voice shaking but firm. Ethan, wide-eyed, nodded, whispering, "Keep filming." Other passengers began murmuring, some pulling out their phones too. The cabin was a powder keg, and David was the spark. "Sir, you need to sit down," Greg shouted, but his authority was crumbling. David stood, facing him, his voice cutting like a blade. "You just assaulted a minor, my son. Do you know who I am? I've spent 20 years fighting people like you in court, and I will see you answer for this." The passengers fell silent, hanging on his every word. Greg's face paled. Marcus, still shaken, managed to sit up, his dad's hand on his shoulder. "I didn't do anything," he whispered. Lila, tears in her eyes, leaned across the aisle. "We saw everything. We've got it on video." Ethan nodded fiercely. "You're going to be okay, Marcus." David turned to the passengers, his voice steady but powerful. "This isn't just about my son. This is about every kid who's judged before they even get a chance. I need witnesses. I need your help." Hands shot up across the cabin, a woman in a business suit, an elderly man with a cane, a college student with earbuds dangling. They saw what happened. They'd speak up. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing an early landing due to an incident. As the plane descended, David helped Marcus to his feet, his arm around him protectively. Lila and Ethan handed David their contact info, promising to share the video. "You're brave," David told them, his eyes softening. Lila blushed, clutching her sketchbook. I couldn't stay quiet." On the ground, police and airline officials were waiting. Greg was escorted off, his badge no longer gleaming. David, Marcus by his side, spoke to the officers, his voice calm but relentless, laying out the facts. The video from Lila's phone was already circulating on social media, tagged #JusticeForMarcus. By the time they left the airport, news outlets were calling David for statements. In the weeks that followed, David built a case that shook the airline industry. The video, combined with passenger testimonies, led to Greg's termination and a broader investigation into the airline's practices. Marcus, though scarred, found strength in the support from Lila, Ethan, and strangers across the country. Lila sent him a sketch she'd drawn on the plane, a jet soaring above the clouds, with "Marcus, future pilot" written below. He hung it above his desk, a reminder of his dream. David and Marcus sat together one night watching the news cover their story. "Dad," Marcus said quietly, "I was scared, but you made it right." David hugged him tightly. "We made it right, son, me, and everyone who spoke up." The plane had landed, but the fight for justice was just taking off.